Harry, today we're going to do a Bible study in the First John chapter 2, verse 3 to 6, and we're going to do it verse by verse. So verse 3 says this: "We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands." What does that mean, Harry?
Yeah, so keeping his commands. Of course, this is the writer of the Gospel of John, and Jesus is mentions that very often there. And it says we know that we have come to know him and to love Jesus if we keep his commands. So what are his commands? Is that the Sermon on the Mount?
That's some of it is on the Sermon on the Mount, but
Yeah,
we find his commands in the Gospels. So Matthew,
yeah.
Mark, Luke, and John.
So what is his number one command? What's Jesus' main command?
Yeah, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength.
Right. And so but to be able to do that, how many people do you think are really doing that?
Yeah, I think almost in a way it's impossible without the Holy Spirit and without the Holy Spirit's help, which draws us near to God is the best way. So very few people, I would say, in the end of all that, truly desire what God offers.
Yeah, and I was in that category. I really only in the last 10 years that I truly have got to love the Lord. But why is that? Because finally I'm trying to be obedient. I focus on really seriously obedient to his teachings, Sermon on the Mount, and that's about 20 teachings there. And then in the rest of the Bible, there's about another 100. So of the New Testament of Jesus' teachings. But it's sort of like in a good family, in a functional family where the children are meant to obey the parents and the parents help them with obedience, teaching them how to do things, how to shut the door, how to shut it nicely, how to keep the mud off the floor, and all these things, all the things that are involved in a functional family. If you do that for, by the time you're 12 years old, you really love your parents, and there's a function, there's a really agreement there. But if the answer from the children is always no, there's not a lot of love that develops. And in the Christian faith, if we're not obedient to Jesus' teachings, then the answer is no. And that's where I was for most of my life. It was just whatever. I just kind of cherry picked. And there's so many of them that are, for example, do not worry is one of them. Well, what's the big deal there? Everybody worries. No, if we're trusting Jesus, we're not worrying. That's just one of the commands. Well, there's so many of them there, but it says if we keep his commands, that is what's expected from us. And if we do that in all these things, we get where we love the Lord.
But it's also something that's natural. When you say that, it's not something that's forced, right? Like we should never be
No,
forcing it.
no, because just like King David said, he says, I love his teachings, I love his commands. That one of the Psalms there, he says that loves that. Why does he love it? Because he's doing it, and once we're doing it, it's beautiful. Like in a functional family, obedience to the parents' teachings, it's beautiful when that all works because the parents want what's best for the children, and Jesus wants what's best for us. He desires that for us, desperately wants it for us.
Verse 4: "Whoever says, 'I know him,' but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person." Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, so again, if we say we know him but we don't do what he's teaching, obviously we won't know him, because how do we get to know our parents is through our interaction. How do we get to know Jesus? Through the interaction. And how do we get the Holy Spirit? By being obedient to his teachings. If we're obedient, we get the Holy Spirit, then we're born again. Without that, we'll never understand Jesus. To those are critical, but they don't happen unless we're obedient to his teachings. Born again nature doesn't come just out of thin air. We have to do our part.
Verse 5: "But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him."
Yeah. So again, if we love him, and then of course then he loves us, but it happens that it gets to be complete. Like we are, like by being obedient, we develop that rapport with him, and he loves us, and again the Holy Spirit comes into our life, and we enjoy this journey together.
Yeah, it's like sanctification, right? The process of
Yeah.
holiness, where
Yeah.
the more you're obedient to him, the more you can experience the love of God in your life and be sanctified in growing into love and truth and a child of God as well.
Yep, for sure.
All right, then the last verse here, verse 6. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did.
And that's exactly what we will do, because we'll have the nature of if we are born again, we have the Jesus nature in our life. And the only way we get to be born again is by obedience, the only way and get the Holy Spirit. And we actually have a Jesus nature. The new nature is a Jesus nature that automatically loves to do his will, that forgives people, to turn the other cheek, to help the hurting, and all those kind of things, and not to worry, and not to live in anger, and all those kind of things, all the things that Jesus did. That is the new nature that comes from that's the Jesus nature, the born again nature that comes from walking with him, and that's based on obedience to his teachings.
Well said, Harry. And if anybody has any questions or comments, leave them down below and we'll be sure to answer them. Thanks a lot for this, Harry.
Thank you.